Well, I guess it's time to light up this epic feud between two women that are considered to many the best in the world. Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of this What If series that I've decided to create, and that is what if AJ Lee stayed in WWE? Now, if those who haven't seen part 1, I will definitely link it in the description and possibly up top on the screen if you haven't seen it. But also, if you would just rather want to watch part 2 and wouldn't want to see part 1 and probably watch it later, here's a quick recap. Now, here is a quick recap of how this whole thing came about. Now, if you guys remember in real life, as I mentioned in part 1, AJ left WWE, or left wrestling in general, due to an injury that sustained in her neck, which she stated in Crazy Is My Superpower, her book. Now, I haven't read her book, I just know that's what she said in her book, because, people have confirmed that with me, that's what she put in her book. So I decided to come up with more of a retcon idea and say, instead of her deciding to retire from the ring, she just decides to take time off and actually recover and get surgery. And I enlisted Naomi as the one to injure her and write her off TV, in the very similar style where Bayley injured Sasha Banks last year. So, yeah, that's basically what I did there. Also, Naomi is the one that dethrones Nikki Bella and becomes Divas Champion. And also, I failed to mention this in part 1, I'm pretty sure many would have figured it out anyway, even though why I didn't even mention it, is that Nikki Bella didn't break AJ's record, because she had to at least make it to Night of Champions to basically pass it. So because she lost it at SummerSlam, Nikki would have been the second longest reign, not the first. Naomi would hold the title until 2016's WrestleMania, dropping it to Sasha Banks. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but in 2017, AJ would return, win the inaugural Royal Rumble. Yes, I know, there was no Women's Royal Rumble in 2017, but I decided to put it here because, I felt like it was the best way to bring AJ back. I'm not going to sit her out for basically 2 years. So AJ is the inaugural Women's Royal Rumble winner in 2017. Challenges Alexa Bliss at WrestleMania and beats her to become SmackDown Women's Champion. Drops it to Carmella. Sasha Banks is now the champion after beating Carmella. Asuka wins the 2018 Royal Rumble as per normal. Faces Sasha at WrestleMania. And this is basically where we are. Sasha beats Asuka at WrestleMania. And then AJ comes out and challenges her. And Sasha beats AJ as well. In 2 straight classic matches at WrestleMania. This is where AJ snaps and turns heel. So this is basically where we left our story. AJ is now a heel, and now we begin the big feud. We begin the big feud between Sasha Banks and AJ Lee. So some of you may be asking, well, okay, we're at Shake Up now, so who ends up going where? Well, for those who are... So there's actually a few other things that I have to mention here. In 2018, we also saw the debut of the Iconics. Does that still happen? Yes, it does still happen, but it doesn't happen on SmackDown. It happens on Raw. Charlotte Flair, as I mentioned in part 1, is the one that dethrones Bayley after being the champion for basically a year. She's basically been champion for a year, so Charlotte ended that reign. And also, this is Charlotte's first legit reign as a champion. If you guys watched all of part 1, I didn't mention at all that Charlotte was champion. So this is Charlotte's first reign, basically since arriving on the main roster in 2015. So it took basically 3 years for her to win her first title. So the whole Iconics debut does happen as per normal, but it happens on Raw, and they beat up Charlotte. But there's one big major difference, that there's no Carmella to cash in. Carmella used her briefcase already on AJ Lee at SummerSlam, so basically the beatdown that Charlotte gets on the Iconics basically still does happen, but there's no one to pick up the scraps to basically take the title from her. But there is something that does happen. After the Iconics are done beating up Charlotte, Bayley does appear and just gives her a rose plant, basically confirming that their feud is going to continue, and Bayley's going to be all like, take that, Charlotte, that's what you get for taking my title. You know, continuing their feud. So Charlotte's going to continue her feud with Bayley, but also having a little mini feud with the Iconics in the background as like a little mid-card feud as well. So, yeah, that's basically what happens on Raw. As for SmackDown, I've decided to come up with this idea. Alexa Bliss is sent to SmackDown, but so is somebody else, but I'm going to keep that hidden for the time being. Sasha Banks, so now we're going to be beginning on the SmackDown after WrestleMania. Sasha Banks comes to the ring, she is furious, and she calls out AJ Lee. She's in the ring, she calls out AJ, and demands her to come out here and face her one-on-one. But this is where the first shake-up person comes out. As I mentioned, Alexa Bliss. Alexa Bliss comes out, not AJ, and Sasha is pretty annoyed right now, and she doesn't want to see anybody interrupting her. Alexa is still a babyface by this point, because if you guys saw my part 1, I mentioned Alexa went over to Raw, basically worked as a babyface, basically been in a bit of a feud with Bayley. And you know how in 2017 Alexa was the heel and Bayley was the babyface? Yeah, I kind of reversed that. And I made Bayley the heel and Alexa the babyface. So remember the whole Bayley This Is Your Life segment? Well, let's just say that got changed to Alexa This Is Your Life. So let's just say the roles were reversed in that whole chestnut. And would Alexa This Is Your Life be better? Would have been better? I think the segment probably would have been a lot more funny and a bit more hilarious. And yes, I do think it would have been better than what they originally did with Alexa and Bayley. But anyway, Alexa is now on SmackDown and she challenges Sasha for the title. Sasha is in no mood and she doesn't want to take any challenges, but agrees anyway. She agrees anyway, just to blow off some steam. This match gets placed in the main event, by the way. So this match is now placed in the main event spot, and these two ladies go at it. As Alexa goes up for the Twisted Bliss and nails it on Sasha, she's about to win the match and the title. And this is where AJ Lee appears. AJ comes into the ring and causes a DQ. Alexa wins the match by disqualification, but not the title. AJ doesn't want anybody taking that title from Sasha Banks unless it's her. So she beats up Alexa Bliss. And this is where the other person that I said that it was also going to come to SmackDown, where I left hidden. AJ continues to beat the hell out of Alexa Bliss until a familiar theme song plays. I'm not like most girls. Nia Jax comes to the ring. Nia Jax was the mystery last person that was going to come over to SmackDown in the Superstar Shakeup. AJ is horrified. AJ is horrified because Nia Jax is her best friend, and they've been partners for a bit on Raw as well. So Nia comes into the ring, she gets AJ off of her, and she helps up her friend. And then she turns around and clobbers Alexa in the head, thus turning heel. So Nia turns heel on Alexa, and she basically aligns herself with AJ. Now, the reason why I went with this is because I felt like AJ needed a new bodyguard. I didn't want to go back to Paige, or I didn't want to go with Tamina, because it's already been done before. Those two things, they've already been done before. So I felt like we needed to freshen things up and make things interesting. So I decided to have Nia Jax be AJ's bodyguard, and, you know, I think it'd be really cool if that's how I just thought that would have been really cool. So yeah, that kickstarts two different feuds. Backlash 2018 comes around, and AJ and Sasha have their first match. This basically ends in a double countout. I know I have to take the AJ Shinsuke Nakamura route here. So yeah, this ends in a double countout. This ends in a double countout where both ladies just continue to brawl and beat the hell out of each other. And now this is where another big key thing changes. Remember how they did a Saudi Arabian pay-per-view before Backlash? Well, I'm changing that. The Saudi Arabian pay-per-view still happens, but I'm changing it. I'm going to be changing its location. and that location is a couple of weeks after Backlash. Now, the Saudi Arabians, as we all know, don't like women's matches, but I'm pretty sure Vince McMahon would be begging the Prince to allow AJ and Sasha to have a match there, because you know they would feud's personal. So the Saudi Prince reluctantly allows these two ladies to compete, and as you know, they would have to wear completely different clothes. So AJ would be wearing pants to the ring and a long shirt, and so would Sasha. They'd both be wearing just weird looking clothes. So yeah, AJ and Sasha, the first ones to compete at Saudi Arabia, and not Natalya and Lacey Evans. Even though I felt like that was a bit more, different. But anyway, the matchup has been normal, and this matchup doesn't have an ending. Still, this one goes to this one actually does have an ending, but this one is a bit different. Does anybody remember the time when Alexa? I'm trying to remember. Does anybody remember the time when Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch double pinned each other in 2016? This was round about the time when they were trying to earn a title match against Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania 32. Does anybody remember that episode of SmackDown where Sasha and Becky both pinned each other? Well, that's where I'm going to be going with here. I'm going to have a spot where AJ and Sasha do a move, and it leads to them both being pinned. It leads to them both being pinned, and AJ thinking she won, and Sasha thinking she won. So in the end, they make the decision that the match is a draw. And because the matchup is a draw, Sasha Banks is still the SmackDown Women's Champion. This obviously enrages AJ, and she goes right after Sasha. The two brawl, and the referees again having to try and break these two up. And this is where it leads to the staging area. And considering the Saudi Arabians have a big-ass staging area, this is where a cool spot comes into play. So AJ is trying to retreat, but Sasha, runs across the stage and jumps off one of the high pillars, doing a meteora, crashing on top of AJ on the outside. Kind of resembling the time when Sasha did a meteora off the top of the announce table at Great Balls of Fire on Alexa Bliss. Yeah, a bit more of a cooler moment like that. That would have been really that. We've got to have a cool moment with Sasha with her meteoras. At Money in the Bank, nothing happens between the two. They decide to give those two a break because they don't really need to do anything at Money in the Bank. Speaking of Money in the Bank, this is where I can talk about something. Peyton Royce is the one that wins the 2018 Money in the Bank, because remember, Alexa Bliss was the original person that won it that year, and because Alexa has been feuding with AJ's personal bodyguard, Nia Jax, Alexa is in the match but doesn't win. She's in the match but doesn't win because Nia makes sure that Alexa doesn't win. It is still kinda the same people that was a part of it, but I think the only thing that changes is basically that the Iconics are in there, and Nia Jax. Those are the only things that are different, is that Nia is in it, and the Iconics are in it. And the Iconics didn't really care who won as long as one of them got the briefcase, so it didn't bother them. Billy and Peyton were basically helping each other anyway, no backstabbing. Alexa was about to pull the briefcase down, but Nia comes out, and she just plucks the ladder, and Alexa crumbles to the outside, crashing through a table that was left outside. Ooh, Alexa taking a nasty, nasty fall. But Peyton Royce picks up the scraps and pulls down the briefcase. So yeah, Peyton Royce is now Miss Money in the Bank, and she vows to cash that in on Charlotte Flair and end her title run. She tries to cash it in on the same night as Alexa Bliss, but this ultimately fails because this is where another big key element comes into the play in Charlotte's feud with the Iconics. Charlotte does beat Asuka at Money in the Bank because they had a friendly match, but this is where Peyton Royce comes out with Billie Kay to try and cash in. They try to cash in, but Becky Lynch comes to the rescue and saves her friend. And this is where Char Lynch merge together to begin a feud with the Iconics. So the Raw Women's title is going to take a backseat while those two teams now begin their rivalry. So that's what happens at Money in the Bank. So Charlotte and Becky now feud with the Iconics, just to make things a bit more interesting and more exciting. Over on SmackDown, Sasha is still the champion, and she makes it, and her and AJ have another match at Battleground. Also on some of the SmackDowns, they have multiple promos. They have a few singles matches against other people, but not really anything significant happens. So now we move to Battleground, and this is where AJ defeats Sasha Banks, due to outside interference from Nia Jax, of course. Nia does interfere a handful of times, but finally Nia Jax's interferences finally catches up to the boss, as AJ gets a quick roll up in on Sasha, and just basically puts her leg on the rope, the referee not seeing it. AJ pinning Sasha Banks by putting her legs on the rope and becoming a two-time SmackDown Women's Champion. AJ is celebrating her big victory, and this is where the big key point of the feud finally comes into play. The big key reason of why these two are feuding is now that AJ can finally explain now that she's the champion. AJ, on the episode of SmackDown right after Battleground, comes out, and she's kind of stopped skipping now. She's kind of over that whole moniker. She doesn't do that anymore, because she feels like that was more like a babyface thing, so she just stops doing it. She becomes a lot like Bayley, the way Bayley is right now with a crazy psychotic character. She's more like Bayley now, just walks to the ring. So with Nia Jax standing by her side, AJ finally explains why she's been targeting Sasha this entire time, and now that she has her title. AJ proclaims that Sasha Banks has been calling herself the best women's wrestler in the world since the moment she arrived. And she's been heavily promoted, heavily praised, and there's also been many media saying that Sasha Banks has taken AJ's place as the top female of WWE. AJ took this to heart, which is why she took this to heart, and she just didn't want to see this anymore. AJ explains why she didn't hit Sasha when she won the Royal Rumble is because she didn't want to embarrass her. She's like, oh, if I battled Sasha then, I would have wiped the floor with her and all the hype would have went away. I gave Sasha a chance to prove herself, and I wanted to pick on little Alexa because, you know, everyone wanted to see me wrestle her. So I just left Sasha alone because I wanted to see if Sasha can really prove herself that she's the best women's wrestler in the world. AJ proclaims that she is the best women's wrestler in the world. And Sasha said it herself, to be the best, you got to beat the best. And AJ says, because I beat the best, I am the best of the best. Alexa's music hits, she comes to the ring. She tells AJ that you are not the best of the best. You had to cheat. You had to take the dirty route to win. And AJ just laughs at Alexa. She's like, oh, what about you? Remember? Oh, really? What about you? You were raking Becky's eyes, putting your feet on the ropes, and doing all kinds of dirty tactics during your run as SmackDown Women's Champion. What makes me any different? And Alexa does agree that she did do some nasty things, but her time on Raw helped her learn. She said, yeah, I did those things, but I also learned. I can also learn from those mistakes, and I changed my ways. Unlike you. You were once a hero, a role model to everybody when you came back. You did something that not many people have done. That is survived a devastating neck injury, and you came back and recovered. Everybody thought your career was over when Naomi ended you. You came back and you proved to everybody that even you can survive these kinds of injuries. And I thought that would have made you a better person, but I guess all it did was rattle your brain, and you became jealous of Sasha Banks. Alexa Bliss demands a match with AJ. AJ just laughs this off, and she's like, I've beaten you so many times already here on SmackDown, I have nothing to prove. So AJ walks away. Shane McMahon, who is basically in charge of the whole thing by this point, makes a tag team match. he has AJ and Nia Jax take on the team of Alexa Bliss and Sasha Banks in a tag team match. And the tag team match happens. And this is where AJ beats, and this is where Sasha beats AJ. Sasha taps out AJ to the bank statement as the team stand tall. And that's the only fan service of Alexa Shah that you are getting in this entire story. And with AJ tapping out the champion, she is now granted a title opportunity, even though she already had one due to a rematch. Sasha comes, this is on the next episode of SmackDown, Sasha comes to the ring for a promo. She talks about how it felt so good to defeat AJ and get some revenge on her, and also makes a challenge. AJ comes out laughing and saying that Sasha, you got lucky. You got lucky, and I wasn't mentally ready. But Sasha just doesn't believe her one single bit. She just laughs this off, thinking that this is just some kind of excuse. So Sasha makes a challenge to AJ at SummerSlam for the SmackDown Women's title. Sasha Banks says to AJ, if you beat me, I will call you the best in the world, and I will never challenge you for that title as long as you are the champion. AJ laughs and accepts, because she would love to hear Sasha tell the entire world that she is the best in the world. And this is where Sasha Banks grins. She's like, oh, you just accepted my match without me finishing. AJ's like, what are you talking about? And this is where a stipulation comes into play. Sasha tells AJ that we're just not going to have any regular match. Oh, no. We are not having a standard one-on-one match. You just accepted a matchup without even knowing. Sasha tells AJ that you'll be facing me at SummerSlam in an I Quit match. AJ's smiling face goes from a smile to pure fear. She just agreed to a match without even knowing the stipulation. So Sasha Banks has outsmarted the SmackDown Women's Champion. Sasha knew how obsessed AJ was of wanting to hear Sasha call her the best in the world. So she took advantage of it and basically caught AJ in a corner. She agreed to the match. There's nothing she can do. She tries to get out of the match. She tries to talk to Shane to get herself out of this matchup because she didn't agree to it. Shane tells her that you did indeed agree to the match and the matchup is taking place. And I know some of you may be thinking, wait, who's GM by this point? By 2018, Paige is GM. And considering you haven't said anything about Paige, is she still the GM? No, Paige still wrestles. No, Paige is still wrestling. She's just on Raw. And Kurt Angle, yes, he's still the GM of Raw, but basically there's no GM on SmackDown. Shane McMahon is basically taking over because Daniel Bryan's back in the ring by this point. So Shane's basically doing it all himself. AJ is furious that she has to go into an I Quit match with Sasha Banks. Now, does anybody remember some of the build towards John Cena and JBL's I Quit match? Yeah, I'm going to be putting some of that in this feud here. Now, I haven't seen the entire build, or I don't remember much of it, but I do remember one specific point in the build from the promo video, and I'm going to place that here. In the promo video that JBL met in the promo video in one of the segments, JBL mentioned in an I Quit match, he mentions that saying I quit means you're selling your soul to another wrestler. And he didn't want to say I quit. AJ kind of repeats the same lines here. She kind of repeats the same lines, but she says it in her own way. She's like, I refuse to say I quit to a girl with blue hair and who thinks she is the best of the best. I am the best of the best. I'm the champion. And there's also another part in the JBL vignette where he beats the hell out of, I think it's Scotty 2 Hotty, and basically forces him to say I quit multiple times. That's what we're going to be doing here with AJ as well. Now, I'm going to be picking Alexa Bliss to do this because I feel like Alexa Bliss would do a good job at selling and also making the visual look really good. I think she'd be a good seller to basically do this whole thing. So for those who are wondering why I'm picking Alexa and not anybody else, it's kind of that reason. I think Alexa would sell this really well and make this look very convincing. So AJ has another match with Alexa Bliss, but she doesn't want to wrestle. She just tells Nia Jax to go in there and take her place. Nia Jax beats the hell out of Alexa, but Alexa ends up winning by disqualification because Nia Jax just doesn't give a shit, and she just beats the hell out of Alexa. Just ignoring the ref, all she wants to do is just hurt Alexa. Alexa at this point is now just being beaten up to a pulp by both ladies, and this is where AJ grabs a steel chair. She grabs a steel chair, she opens it, sits it, plucks it up, put it on its legs, sits it down in the ring, grabs a microphone and sits in it, kind of sits in it like this, and she just continues to watch Nia Jax beat up Alexa Bliss. Leg drop after leg drop after leg drop, and AJ just constantly puts the microphone near Alexa's mouth just to hear her say "I quit." Alexa does try to hold off as much as she can and reluctantly says it, doesn't say no. She continues to say no a couple of times. That is until well, they do it by force. AJ grabs her chair, and she just, by the sharp edges of the bottom part of the chair, she places it on Alexa's neck, choking her. And she has Nia Jax forcefully pull down on it as hard as she can. Alexa Bliss is struggling to breathe, and AJ puts the microphone near Alexa's face, and Alexa is coughing and saying "I quit" over and over and over again. AJ is smiling and she is loving this. She just continues to listen to Alexa say "I quit," and it's just reveling. It is just so satisfying. AJ is just loving the sound of Alexa's voice just coughing and saying "I quit." She just loves seeing Alexa Bliss in pain. Until finally Sasha Banks comes out to the ring and ultimately makes the save, and the pair flee. Now the time has come for SummerSlam. The time has finally come as this feud is ready to hit its climax. Yep, an I Quit match is basically the climax of this feud. I did say I was going to do this entire feud from its entire existence, from the start to end. I wasn't saying it was definitely going to pull a Charlotte and Sasha where it goes through the entire year. I feel like SummerSlam is the good point to end the entire feud. So this is where the feud comes to an end. SummerSlam, it's a good card at SummerSlam. And Charlotte Flair is defending her title against her best friend Becky Lynch as an agreement for helping her out with the Iconics, and also now a newly heel-turned Asuka in a triple threat match. Charlotte is successful in retaining, and she is successful in retaining, pinning Asuka. And this is where the Iconics come to the ring. The Iconics come to the ring and starts attacking Charlotte and Becky Lynch. To make sure Becky Lynch doesn't interfere again like she's done every other time when Peyton tries to cash in, Billie Kay just takes out Becky Lynch with the shades of Kay. Peyton Royce cashes in her briefcase and pins Charlotte Flair to become the new champion. They basically hit the fall of grace. They basically do the fall of grace on Charlotte Flair. Peyton Royce pins her, and yeah, Peyton Royce is now the new Raw Women's Champion, pinning Charlotte Flair at SummerSlam, and the crowd go wild. The crowd go wild at the sight because we've got a new star that was created. Billie Kay lifts Peyton Royce above her head, places her on her shoulder, as the visual of Peyton Royce holding the title above her head. And yep, that right there is a star created right there. And now we move to Sasha Banks versus AJ. The match is now set as the main event for the SmackDown Women's title. And the matchup is really, really damn good. The promo package, the hype package, is also good. From their matches, to their promos, to everything. And And this is where it all leads up to this point. Sasha Banks comes out as the challenger, and she heads to the ring, confident and really excited for this opportunity. Sasha heads to the ring in her Great American Bash gear, and she heads confidently to the ring. AJ comes out as well, and no Nia Jax because Shane McMahon barred her from ringside. And also backstage, before Sasha came to the ring, she also saw Alexa. Alexa offered to come and help if she needed it. Sasha says, "No, I don't need your help." Alexa wishes her good luck as Sasha walks off. Now, if you guys think that Sasha not accepting Alexa's offer is going to come back and bite her, it doesn't. Trust me, it's not going to lead to anything. Alexa understands that Sasha wants to fight her own battle. So the match happens, and boy oh boy, it is a great one. A whole bunch of Meteoras, yes, from Sasha Banks, because Meteora is basically her main move. And there's also a few crazy spots here and there. There's one spot where Sasha does a Meteora and she crashes AJ through the table. Think of it as the time when Sasha did a Meteora on Becky Lynch through a table inside that Hell in a Cell match. A whole bunch of Meteoras later, AJ gets the upper hand and wears down Sasha. AJ is reveling in this, taking it in that she's got Sasha right where she wants her. Continues to beat her down. Beats her down pretty badly too, trying to force Sasha to say I quit. She does exactly what she did to Alexa. Puts the chair and drives it on her neck, and the referee puts the microphone right near Sasha's face, and Sasha doesn't quit. Sasha doesn't quit. AJ pushes harder and harder and harder and harder, but Sasha doesn't quit. Sasha fights free, and the brawl between the two continues. And now we get to the climax. The climax of this feud happens exactly what happened between Sasha Banks and Bayley inside Hell in a Cell. Sasha grabs the steel chair and wraps it around AJ's neck and applies the Banks statement while the chair is wrapped around her neck. AJ tries to fight it and fight it and fight it until AJ finally utters the words, "I quit." AJ finally quits, and Sasha Banks has done it. She is once again SmackDown Women's Champion for a second time in her career. AJ holding her neck as she gets up. This is where the two break character. And they hug in the ring. Fans are quite surprised, but they also really do appreciate that they're hugging because they had a great match. AJ grabs a microphone and she says to the world what I think a lot of people wanted to hear her say. She has a microphone in her hand, and AJ says, "Sasha, you have definitely proved that you are indeed the best of the best. You beat the best. You are the best of the best." AJ drops the mic and walks away, putting over Sasha Banks even more. And that is where we're going to be ending things. I think this is a great climax to the end of this feud. I'm thinking maybe there could be more I could do with AJ, but I don't know. I think this is a good time to end it. Now, I'm gonna leave this up to you guys. I'm gonna leave this up to you guys in the comment section down below. What does AJ do? Does she retire, or does she continue her career? If she retired, if you choose that she retires, then basically this is the end of AJ's run in WWE, and this is the final part. But if she chooses to stay, then maybe I could think of a part 3. But I don't know what else I could possibly think of. But we'll see what I can think of if you guys do choose the option that she stays. So I'll leave it up to you guys. Does AJ retire, or does she stick around for maybe another year or two? You guys let me know down below, as this is the end of part 2 of What If AJ Stayed in WWE. She puts over Sasha Banks heavily, and AJ takes a leave of absence for a while. So you guys let me know down below, what do you guys think should happen next? Does AJ stay, or does she retire? You guys let me know down below. I'll see you all next time.